You're listening to Unbound Off Script. Today, Beth Curry is stepping away from the noise to talk about the things that carry weight. Whether it's a personal reflection or a response to the heavy things you've shared with her, this is a space for the raw and the real.
Hey, all you beautiful people. Welcome back to Unbound Off Script. Today I'm doing a birthday episode for my mom. Today is her birthday, her 76th birthday. And when you tell her that, her jaw drops and she tries to argue with you because she can't believe it herself. I want to start somewhere that, I don't know, it might be uncomfortable for some people. I don't know if you are listening to this and you're new here or if you've actually sat through some of my seasons. But season 1 was about my mom and her dementia journey, as well as her life, everything before. I had some of her friends kind of pop in and tell me some stories growing up with her, some of my friends as well, who I've known for decades, who've known mom forever as well. They've become second children to her. Just, everyone's given some input, relatives, things like that. And I read the book that I wrote in season 1 and shared a lot about my mom. But I want to start in this place where I think it's kind of uncomfortable. I think that's where real things live, in the honest telling of uncomfortable things. And Sunday, for me, at least, was uncomfortable before it became what it also was by the end. And I think my mother would want the honest telling, she always did. So Sunday we got together. I actually managed to pull, we have very few family members left, we're a very small family now. And I managed to get everybody to come together to celebrate mom's birthday this past Sunday. We got there first, and when I walked into her room, she was the worst I had ever seen her. I want to kind of hold that thought, those words gently, because she deserves gentleness, but I also want to say it plainly because you've been with me on this journey long enough. Most of you have anyway. You deserve that plainness. You understand. Many of you go through this as well. The last few months have really marked a shift. Not that slow kind of accumulated drift of years, something almost a bit sharper, like a threshold has been crossed. And on Sunday, her birthday celebration, when the people who love her the most had gathered in the same room, initially she was almost entirely absent from it. I was really worried because I said, let's just leave her to sleep here and we'll check back in. We'll go to the celebration room and we'll just wait for everyone else to show up and whatever. But my aunt had been there too. She had just arrived. So she came with me to the celebration room, and my son, and Brian stayed back with my mom. And he actually has this magical way of getting her to respond. And I heard them coming down the hall. He brought her down the hall. By then my sister and her family were there as well. So initially he got her to the room, but even when he did, and when I initially found her in her bed, her eyes weren't connecting. She didn't recognize me at all. And there was no light bulb like there normally is when I tell her that it's me and that I'm there and tell her about everyone else who's there. Now, this is another thing as well. Too many visitors at once really overwhelms her and causes her to kind of retreat. So that was another thing that I saw coming. I'm like, okay, so she's starting this out awful and family's going to be there. And it's going to be too many people. And it's just not going to be good. So, I was pretty concerned. So yeah, her eyes didn't connect with mine, not that the way that they sometimes don't, like that kind of distracted and traveling in time way that I've come to see as her moving through decades. This was different. It was closer to the lights being completely off in a room where someone used to live. Okay. Like she was not engaging. She had no interest. She just wanted to sleep. But I stood at the edge of that gathering and felt something I don't really have a clean psychological term for right now. It wasn't really grief. Like I know grief well enough to know its shape and what it feels like. I'm still wallowing in it right now because we lost our sweet kitty last week. It wasn't, it wasn't fear exactly, though fear was somewhere in there for sure. But it was like witnessing like the edge of something. It's so hard for me to describe. I don't know. It was like a shoreline. I hadn't realized we were approaching this quickly. Um, and I thought, this might be what the end of the chapter looks like. But then, we all sat down in that celebration room and we kept being her family anyway, because that's the only thing to do in this situation, right? And what happened next is the reason why I wanted to give her a birthday episode today. She came back, not all the way, not to the mom who could write a spontaneous poem about your grade 3 teacher that you still have over 40 years later. Not the mom who, played Atari back in the 80s and the dry humor and that kind of stuff. Not quite to that, but she came back to us, right? She found the people in the room. She came toward her family, this small and perfect remaining constellation of people she built her life around. And she came toward us. And something in her that still knows what love feels like recognized that it was in the room, and she moved toward it, And I've just been sitting with that ever since. What that costs her, what that means, I don't know. I don't know what's happening in her brain. It's so hard to know. And it's just like I keep returning to that too. She didn't have to. The disease does not require this of her. Her brain at this stage has no obligation to find us or anyone. There's no neurological imperative that says, come back for the people who love you. And yet she did it. And she did it. Like she sang silly songs again. She was talking about colors. And she started singing a song, and she made silly comments about her sons-in-law being brainless. I don't know. She was just kind of silly and it was just different from when I first walked into her room. There's a concept in attachment theory, the work of John Bowlby, later built on by Mary Ainsworth, about the idea of a secure base. The premise is that we are biologically wired to orient toward our primary attachment figures in times of distress or disorientation, right? Make sense? We move toward the people who have been, over a lifetime, the source of safety. We were her secure base. We are her people. And even now, even in that fog, something in her knows it. And I think she came back because, I don't know, love has a direction, right? And even when she can't find much else, she can find which way it points, I think. Anyway, today, 76. I've been kind of turning that number over, trying to comprehend, it's wild to me that she's still here. My mom was born on a day I wasn't there for, into a family I only know in fragments, her meteorologist father who sent weather balloons up from a post in Northern Ontario. She loved to tell that story. And a nurse mother who bundled her against cold she still remembers. A childhood in places like Big Trout Lake and Seattle that gave her a particular relationship with weather and with space and with being small in a large world, right? She grew up and she became the mom who I remember. The kettle was always on and those wooden clogs, and she sang in the church choir on Sundays, and she worked at the church, and she did the bulletins, and she wrote spontaneous poetry, and the worry and the magnificent Olympic-level worry that once produced a police escort home from a 10-minute drive. For Dad, I talked about that in season 1. She became this woman who raised 2 daughters to be entirely different people and somehow held both of them with the same love, just differently shaped, I guess. She became the woman who sat in a Delhi living room in 2020 and said, I knew. A mother knows when her child is carrying something too heavy. She became the woman who, when my father leaned against a car and said he didn't know what he'd do without her, and he was already quietly declining for longer than any of us knew, she became the woman at Willow Grove in Scenic Woods, and that's still her. All 76 years of her compressed into the woman who, at the start of her birthday party on Sunday, was barely with us, and by the middle of it had rallied enough to be there. 76 is just kind of a random number, right? It doesn't round up into a milestone. It's just this number her life has reached 1 year further into something none of us chose, but all of us are inside. And I don't know, I guess none of us would trade because it means that she's still here. I'm going to say the thing out loud that I've been thinking since Sunday, and especially today. Is this the last one? Is this her last birthday? I don't know. Nobody knows. That's one of the crueler features of this disease. It doesn't give you a timeline, and it doesn't hand you a calendar with a circled date so you can brace for it and prepare for it and make sure you said everything that needed saying. It just keeps moving in its own direction at its own pace. And I guess you follow behind it trying to keep up. But the question has been sitting in me since Sunday in a way it hasn't before, I think, because the shift that I saw, the shift that I'm watching in these last few months is different from the years before it. I'd say the decline feels less like a slow drift and more like a steepening or something, if that makes sense. And when I watched her, when we first arrived, so far away, so absent, I thought quietly in the part of myself I don't always say out loud, what if we only get a few more of these? What if we only get one more? What if this is it? I don't say that to be dark, I say it because I think a lot of you ask the same question about someone you love sometimes, and nobody's saying it, and the unsaid things have weight. And I don't know if it just feels heavier to me because we just lost our kitty suddenly last week. Like, death is weird, and you look back and you think I should have seen it coming, and did I do all of the right things, and did I say all of the right things? And yes, it's a pet versus a parent, but it doesn't really, change the core of that questioning and that guessing. So I've talked endlessly about anticipatory grief, which is grieving for a loss that hasn't fully happened yet, mourning forward in time. But the terms always kind of felt a little clinical to me for what this actually is, because it's not just about what's coming, it's about the in-between and the now, which is kind of an impossible thing to hang on to as well. She's here, and the question of whether this is the last birthday sits right beside that fact, and both things are true at the same damn time, and there's just no way to kind of resolve that tension. I can't explain it. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out how to explain it. You just kind of carry it. What I'm learning slowly and definitely imperfectly is that the question of last doesn't have to hollow out the present. I think it can sharpen it. It can be the reason that you sit a little closer, you hold the hand a little bit longer, you say the things that you might leave for next time. I think about the last time I saw my dad, and for the first time ever that day, I didn't hug him. And I still carry regret for that. So, at least now I have this opportunity to do better in the anticipation with my mom. The not knowing is terrible, but it's also, if you let it, an invitation to be completely present for what's actually here. She came back on Sunday. That birthday happened. Whatever comes next, this one was real, right? I don't know. I just want to kind of touch on something I haven't named directly enough right now. This, for me, is a season of relentless loss. Not one loss, many since 2023. Ongoing, accumulating. Some of them have been sudden. And I think I've been so focused on documenting and processing and finding the meaning in individual moments that I haven't stopped to just say plainly and without a frame that it is exhausting to lose someone this slowly. It's aging me in ways I didn't expect and certainly didn't want. When people think about grief, they usually think about a moment, right? The call, the hospital, the funeral, there's a before and there's an after. And as brutal as that kind of loss is, it has shape to it. I've been there. I was just there 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. You can point to it. Other people can see it. The world knows to show up with food and flowers and the acknowledgement that something significant has happened. But the long goodbye does not work that way. The long goodbye is years of small losses stacked on top of each other. Just with her, just with this particular situation. Each loss is kind of requiring its own quiet adjustment and its own internal reckoning, and almost none of them are visible from the outside. Nobody sends flowers when your mom stops being able to follow a conversation, and nobody brings you a casserole the first time she doesn't recognize you for an entire visit. There's no ceremony for the day she stopped being able to read, or the day poetry started coming less often, or the day you realized that she lost the thread of who Crew is growing into because the version of him she holds is frozen somewhere years back. Like, she thought he was 4 the other day. And when I did, like just now, I said, stopped being able to read. My mom read a bag. She got one word wrong on it, but she read all the words on it. So that was amazing to me because she has not handed books an opportunity to read. These were big block letters, and she has severe visual impairments. So it was pretty impressive. But anyway, all of these things, they're real losses. They deserve to be named. And this specific season, the last few months has brought more weight on top of that because I'm watching her be lonely and I don't know how to fix it. That might be the hardest part of where we are right now. My mom thrived on people. If you knew her, if you know her, you know this. She was a woman who needed community the way other people need sleep. This was oxygen to her. She was always around people and helping people and visiting, and the kettle was always on because there was always someone at the table 7 days a week at the church, not because she was obligated for her job, but because that was where the people were. And she was someone who ran entirely on human connection, friends for decades, neighbors, students, the congregation, our extended family, always in and out, always welcome, always fed. That is the woman now sitting alone in a room at Willow Grove on the days that I'm not there. The dementia has taken so much. But that isolation, the absence of the social world that she built her entire identity around, this might be the loss she would feel the most if she could fully feel it. I think so anyway. On her clear days, she does feel it. She'll say something like, nobody visits me, which I know is not factually true. And I know it's hard for people. That's an environment you don't want to be in, and it's hard to see someone you loved for so long become what my mom is now. So it isn't factually true, but it's completely emotionally true for her, right? The visits she gets now are not what she would have called a life before. And the friends that she had, the friends who were as essential to her as oxygen, many of them are gone by choice or not, or they're just too far, or they're navigating their own late life diminishments, right? Like the community she built and poured herself into for 40 years simply isn't available to her anymore in any form that she can access. And I sit with that a lot, the injustice of it. The particular cruelty of a disease that removes you from the thing that sustained you the most. She had Dad in those first few years, and he was always there. And then he died, and she had to go to strangers. Like I don't know. That's another thing underneath all of this other layer of loss that I carry that I haven't fully said out loud. My dad's been gone for 2.5 years, and I'm still grieving him differently, of course. Like it's not as raw anymore. But I'm also the person responsible for being present for the grief of his absence in her. Like every time she asks where he is and every time I have to deliver the news fresh because her brain can't hold it, I'm doing my own grief and hers simultaneously in this endless loop that doesn't have an end. That is this season. It's relentless loss. It's the long goodbye. It's the not knowing and the keeping going anyway. I am not okay every day. I want you to know that. I'm okay enough. But not okay every day. Something I want to talk about too is what it means for her creativity to persist right now. Not last year, not in the early chapters of this nonsense. Now, in this kind of harder season, she still sometimes spontaneously comes up with poetry. It surfaces without warning and without intention, and it's triggered by something she's noticed or something she's feeling, and she doesn't have other words for it. She'll be mid-sentence and then her eyes change and there's this quality to her eyes right before it happens, and then the words come and they're words that rhyme. They don't always land, but they rhyme, and it's cute and it's fun and it's funny and it's creative. And I want you to understand what this means for the brain because I think it changes the frame on what we're witnessing. The parts of the brain that this disease hits hardest are deep in the center, the structures responsible for encoding new memories and retrieving recent ones. So think of them like the brain's filing system. When those structures are damaged, the brain can't file new information or easily retrieve recent files. That's why the disease takes what happened that morning before it takes what happened in 1968, right? That's why she can't always tell you what she had for breakfast, but she can tell you she quit smoking on April 29th, 1989 at a train station. But creative language, the capacity for spontaneous rhyme or for metaphor, her sing-songs, whatever she's doing, for finding like an unexpected image that captures something true, that doesn't live in one place. It's kind of woven through the whole brain simultaneously. It draws on memory and emotion and language and rhythm and sensation, all of that all at once. And because it's spread across so many pathways, when one route closes, the poem can find another one. It's the most resilient thing we do with language because it has the most ways in. And that's why she can still do it. That's what we're witnessing when she makes the hailstones dance in the sun, wear a raincoat, like her little season one. Anyway, what I keep sitting with though, she's doing it now. I know that she's at least mid-stage because she's doing what we call the toddler talk and toddler kind of behavior. She's further into this than she's ever been. Whatever's narrowing and closing and making this year harder than last year, the poetry is still there and it's still surfacing and it's still reaching. And I don't know what to do with that except to say it feels like the most essentially her thing there is. And the disease hasn't touched it yet, thank God. Like the last thing to go will be her ability to make the world more beautiful than she found it, I think. I find that hopeful and devastating and exactly right all at the same time. I wanted to use this episode to say some things I haven't said yet. Not heavy things. I don't want to use her birthday for heaviness, but honest things. I miss her in a way that's hard to explain to people who haven't experienced this particular kind of loss because she's still here. She's right there, sitting in a chair at Willow Grove. And I can still sit next to her and hold her hand and listen to whatever version of the world she's living in on any given day. She's here. And I miss her. I miss her advice, the specific kind of advice she used to give, which wasn't advice so much as it was clear-eyed reading of you, delivered with love and without softening. The kind that made you feel known rather than managed. She was incisive. She was wise. She saw things other people didn't see. She still sees things other people don't see, actually. That hasn't entirely gone. She'll look at me sometimes and say something that makes me realize that she's read me more accurately than anyone else in the room. I guess it's that maternal precision that lives somewhere deeper than memory and just kind of keeps surfacing regardless of what else is happening. She can see when I'm still protecting myself, and she's right. She'll tell me and she's right. She's still almost always right. But I miss the version of her that I could take home and turn over for days afterward, the version where she remembered the conversations next week and asked how it went, and the version where she was with me and the way she used to be with me, and where I could call her when my cat dies because I'm sad and I feel like nobody else really gets it. And I'm sitting there torturing myself in the silence and I have nobody to talk to. I miss that and I'm allowed to miss that. And so are you if you're somewhere in this too. I also want to say the last few months have been harder than I've let on to anyone. I just put on a happy face and say everything's great, but it's not. The decline has been more visible and more rapid feeling, than the years before. There's something about this stage that's different from the early years of this journey because the confusion is deeper and the absences are longer and the moments of clarity are more precious because they are genuinely rarer. And Sunday, watching her be so far away at the start of her own birthday celebration was the hardest single moment I've had in a while. But she came back. I keep coming back to that too. She came back. I want to talk about hope for a minute too, because I think we misuse the word. Hope, I guess when someone you love is in late stage cognitive decline, does not look like recovery. Okay? It doesn't look like the timeline reversing. It doesn't look like the clarity she had on Sunday becoming her new baseline. That kind of hope is actually grief in disguise, and it's the refusal to be where we actually are, I think. Real hope right now looks different. It looks very specific. It looks like she came back on Sunday. That was hope. The poetry is still there. That was hope. She read that bag and missed one word. She just blended two words into one and created a different actual word with it. That's hope. She still asks if I'm eating enough. That's hope. She still knows on some level that dementia hasn't reached yet. Whose people she is and where she belongs when the room is full of love. Psychologist Barbara Fredrickson's research on positive emotions, what she calls the broaden and build theory, suggests that moments of genuine joy and connection and love don't just feel good in the moment. They build psychological resources over time. They expand what we're capable of, even in the midst of a journey like this one. The good moments aren't a break from the real work. They are the work. They're what sustains everything else. Sunday had a hard beginning, a genuinely hard beginning. And I have a feeling I'm going to carry that for a while. And then her family was in the room and she found us and there was a birthday celebration and it was real. That's where the hope lives, not in the reversal, not in the healing because it's never coming, but in the finding. Mom, you're 76 years old today. I've stopped assuming I know which year you're visiting when I walk in, let alone which day, but the birthday is real and I want to mark it. You're probably not going to hear this, but I want to tell you some things and I want you to hear them the way that you used to hear things. If you do hear this, maybe I'll play this episode for you when I come see you. I want you to hear it with that particular quality of attention you had and the one that made whoever was talking feel like the most important person in the room. You have been remarkable. Not in the performance of it, not in the public-facing put-together way that you were such a pro at, but in the private, accumulative, daily practice of it. The way you showed up for people, the way you held space for the complicated things, and the way that you made a home that was genuinely, warmly, reliably home. Not because it was perfect, but because you were in it. You taught me things I'm still learning about honesty, about the kind of love that stays, about how to be fully present with another person, which is rarer than it sounds, especially with cell phones being a thing, and more valuable than almost anything I can name. You also taught me things you didn't know. You were teaching me like how to find a poem inside of a hard moment and how to meet people where they are and how being fully yourself is more generous than any performance of niceness. I carry you everywhere I go. The parts of me that are good are mostly learned from you. 76 years, I don't have a word for that. It's a big number. I just have gratitude and grief and the kind of love that doesn't have anywhere else to put itself except here in this episode, in this microphone, sent out to the people who've walked this road with us. Happy birthday. Come back to us whenever you can. We'll always be here. And if you're listening and you're somewhere in this journey too, if you have a parent or a partner or a sibling who is doing the slow, complicated work of still being here, I want you to know I see you. I always remind people who are going through something that I can see them because I've been there. The parking lot moments, the gatherings that start hard and end beautifully and leave you somewhere that you can't even name. You're not alone in this, not even a little. I'm always here. If you want to reach out, the contact info is in the show notes. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you listening. Happy birthday, Mom. I love you.
You've been listening to Unbound Off Script. We know these aren't always easy places to go, and we appreciate you being here with Beth Curry as she stumbles through the things that matter most. If you have something on your heart that you'd like her to speak to, we're here. Contact info is in the show notes. Until next time, be good to yourself and others.